Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Super Mario 3D All-Stars as a full collection, rather than review all three games individually. There might be a couple of repeated points here and there for the sake of making it feel like a collection's worth of work, rather than working on one game. But the point stands that I'm not trying to copy other reviewers that are doing, let's review all three games first and then review the collection as a whole. Actually, the main reason I'm doing this is because I was dissatisfied with my Mario Galaxy re-review, where I basically was like, I've got some time to kill, so let's shove in my thoughts on the collection as a whole at the very end. I want to be able to do it justice, and I want to be able to make Nintendo really feel bad for some of their stupid decisions here, because in my personal opinion, from what I've watched on YouTube and seen of people like King K doing over-analyzing this game, I actually think they were being too easy on Nintendo, so I'm gonna hold nothing back. I may be the Catholic Nintendo nerd, but that's not gonna stop me from tearing this game to pieces if Nintendo is not working as hard as they possibly can. If they're being a bunch of evil corporate overlords, I'm gonna call them out for it. So, for starters, I've heard people say, well, you know, the amount of effort put into this is ridiculous compared to how much effort was put into Kirby's Dream Collection for the Wii. I'm not going to reiterate that point. That was an amazing collection. I actually own it and have played most of it, and I love it. And I do agree that that was a way better collection than this. Although, to be fair, the one edge this has over Kirby's Dream Collection is that most of the games on that collection were not good. These are all good games, even if they're not all great ones. Whereas there were some games in Kirby's Dream Collection that were absolutely awful. But as a collection, it was handled beautifully, and is definitely one of Nintendo's best many games in one efforts, possibly ever. However, I want to be even more cruel. That makes me sound so evil, but let me explain. That was said, Nintendo did all that on the Wii. However, Nintendo also made a collection of Zelda games on the GameCube that not a whole lot of people have heard about. Now, I don't know if these other analyzers simply forgot about it, or if they didn't get their hands on the disc. Well, I did. Gotta love used game stores. It's called The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition for the GameCube. It was released as sort of a sit tight and wait while we're working on Wind Waker type of thing. It had the first two Zelda games on the NES, then it also had the N64 Zelda games, plus it had a playable demo of the Wind Waker, so early in development that most of the areas didn't even have names in the demo, plus it had a Wind Waker showcase video, plus, it had a video showcasing footage of every Zelda game up to that point, including Wind Waker, with the exception of the CDI Zelda games, because no one talks about those. So, admittedly, not much work was done to the four games being remastered, besides, like, a slightly higher resolution and a couple of button remapping choices, such as making the icons in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask look like GameCube controller buttons instead of N64. However, that's about where the work ended. But you could forgive them for that because this wasn't meant to be a celebration. It wasn't made as an anniversary. It was meant to tide people over for Wind Waker. And I think they succeeded masterfully, as at the time, most of us were happy enough just to have these games playable anywhere. I didn't have an NES back then. Virtual Console didn't exist, so I was like, I can finally play Zelda 1. I don't particularly like Zelda 1, but at the time, before we had things like NES Classic Edition and Nintendo Switch Online, this was the best thing we could have compared to a virtual console. So, if Nintendo can make that much effort... Oh, and I forgot to mention they remixed the Zelda theme song for the menu, so they composed all new music. Why couldn't they do that for a Mario Celebration? How can Nintendo, now that they're Japan's richest company, put less effort into a game now than they did when they weren't one of Japan's richest companies? And the GameCube was a financial disaster for Nintendo. At the time, the GameCube was basically what people think about the Wii U nowadays. But yet Nintendo put so much effort into that one little GameCube disc on a system that was deemed a failure. Why can't they do that on the Switch? So, I might be asking for way too much here, but here's how I would have handled the collection. Granted, I'm not a game developer, and also granted, I would not be afraid of delays. I would just say, sorry public, but if we want to give you good stuff, you're gonna have to wait. I would have said, let's make Super Mario 64 Definitive Edition, plus, let's make Super Mario Sunshine actually playable, and let's make a Super Mario Galaxy Definitive Edition. Would that have prevented this from being an All-Stars collection? Yes, it would. But it would give Nintendo an excuse to re-release these games separately for budget prices, which is basically what they already did in 2006 with the Wii Virtual Console. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that was a system that worked, and they just decided, let's get rid of it. Why? I have no clue, but if I had to guess, it's probably because the Virtual Console existed on the Wii U, and it doesn't seem like Nintendo wants anything to do with that system, despite the fact that a lot of us, myself included, love our Wii U's, and I'm actually still playing it to this day. I'm actually replaying Paper Mario, so yay. Alas, what we get is one of the most half-baked efforts they've done this entire year. Now, you could argue, well, Paul, you gotta remember that Nintendo's going through a pandemic here, so you can't be too hard on them. Well, let me point you in the direction of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. That was one of the first games announced in the very first video that Nintendo ever did, where they did the things might be delayed due to COVID videos. And yet, it made its May deadline, and it had the graphics overhauled to fit more of a hybrid between the first and second Xenoblade games. Plus, they remastered pretty much the entire soundtrack. Plus, they added Future Connected, which not only was an expansion to the story, but they brought back the original cast, and the area they used was actually a cut area from the original Wii game. And that was also published by Nintendo. Now you could argue, but Paul, it was done by Monolith Soft. And this was done by Nintendo altogether. If that's the case, why didn't Nintendo just hire another company to help them with this collection? They're the richest company in Japan, for crying out loud. Or, at the very least, not make this collection and make an announcement we're making a Super Mario 64 Definitive Edition and a Super Mario Galaxy Definitive Edition that has all the content for both Mario Galaxy games, like it was meant to, like we've already done with Hyrule Warriors. So Nintendo doesn't even seem to want to repeat their own past. I mean, come on! If you can't even take advice from your own company, you know you're really money-hungry idiots, or at least I assume so. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, because my channel name is the Catholic Nintendo Nerd. I'd like to believe the best in these guys, but yeah, even the best of companies can make dumb decisions sometimes. Now, regarding the games individually, there was some pretty lazy work done to make these run on the Switch. Now, admittedly, people would argue, okay, well, Nintendo would be able to get away with this if they were on the Virtual Console, as they did the exact same thing with the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. I can't argue with that one. That is absolutely true. In fact, people have done side-by-side comparisons, and they found that the Wii U ports of some of the N64 games actually look worse than their N64 originals because the colors are a lot darker. As someone who actually owns a Nintendo 64, I can confirm this. They are indeed feeling like you're playing them in the dark, compared to the bright, vibrant colors of my N64 TV, as primitive as it was. However, I think because Nintendo made the slightest of touch-ups here, that justified them saying that's why it's not on the Virtual Console, because these aren't simple ports. Well, in that case, why not take the Sega Ages route, where you just release them as individual games and touch them up and add a whole bunch of new features? This isn't rocket science, Nintendo. You yourself have done this with some of your games. Okay, so for starters, why does Mario 64 have ugly black borders? You could argue, but Paul, if Nintendo stretched it out, that would make the display look terrible. I'm not suggesting they stretch the display. I'm asking that they display more information. if there's more stuff going on the sides of the screen, make it possible to see what's going on the sides of the screen. You don't have to reimagine the graphics or anything. You could probably still keep it 16-bit, just have it so that whatever would have been on the black side is now visible, so you can see more of the level than you ever could before. That could be a super cool selling point too. The Switch is wider, so you can see more of the levels. That would have been one of the best Nintendo commercials ever. They actually did do that with Super Mario Sunshine, so I don't see how they couldn't have gotten away with that for Mario 64. Not to mention, Super Mario Sunshine actually controls worse than it did on the GameCube. And I thought I was going crazy when I thought that in my original review. I thought I must be getting really old and really senile if I'm actually thinking the Joy-Cons are worse than a GameCube controller. But no, I wasn't the only one. There were analysts on YouTube saying that the GameCube control stick was significantly more sensitive to subtle movements, and the Joy-Con sent Mario flying in the wrong direction. So apparently I am not going crazy. Nintendo actually unoptimized the controls to make this even more unplayable than people complained about it in 2002. So if people hated Mario Sunshine before, this collection, rather than doing what I think we all hoped and making them realize, you know what, we should have given this game a second chance, has actually made it age even worse. So what? Is that Nintendo's way of saying, yeah, Super Mario Sunshine is actually a really bad game, and we're just gonna stop trying to fight the naysayers and just agree with them? Are they giving up on their own game? What the heck kind of move is that? You've got people that actually defend Super Mario Sunshine, unlike Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. Well, I think that's actually a fair point to make. At least this is way better than the effort they made at Amiibo Festival. But the point still stands that Super Mario Sunshine, even the people that defended it, had their things about it that they didn't like. And Nintendo did nothing, absolutely nothing, to change the problematic parts of the game. They could have made more courses or redesigned them from scratch or added little itty-bitty touches, even if they were as minor as the stuff they did in Xenoblade Definitive Edition, like adding arrows to some of Shulk's attacks in case they were position-oriented. Just to name a couple of things off the top of my head. Maybe if Nintendo had an exclamation mark on the map that showed up and said, this is where you should be going, or there'd be a progress bar saying how long it took to get to the next area. Made it so that instead of making it so that after Mario completes episode 7 of every world, make it so that it's based on how many shine sprites Mario has gotten. Every other Mario game in 3D before and after this has taken that approach. Why did Nintendo not feel like they could learn a thing or two from Super Mario Odyssey and other 3D Mario games, including a game in this own collection, Super Mario Galaxy, and apply some of that? Wouldn't it have been really cool if maybe some of the best parts of Super Mario Galaxy were incorporated into Mario Sunshine? Like, admittedly this will probably be really cheesy, but to some people, they'd probably have a blast if maybe a player off-screen could shoot FLUDD just like a player would be shooting Starbits in Super Mario Sunshine. That would be a great use of the Joy-Cons. For that matter, now that I think about it, why didn't Nintendo try to incorporate motion controls into Super Mario Sunshine? Wouldn't it have been cool to try to use FLUDD with the right Joy-Con? Some people would have bemoaned, oh no, Nintendo's going into motion controls. But if they could get the Joy-Cons to work in Mario Galaxy, why couldn't they have gotten it to work in Mario Sunshine as well? It feels like they didn't try to universally make the games sort of the same. Like, they're already so separate and made on 3 separate pieces of hardware to begin with. So rather than having a unified engine, like, say, the Crash Insane trilogy and Spyro Reignited trilogy did, they decided to make the games look and feel like you remember them, which, to some, is going to be totally fine. There are people, like my siblings, who do not approve of remakes in the slightest. And so, they probably, to this day, won't even touch Super Mario 64 DS because it's a remake of a classic. However, most people are not like my siblings. They'd love to see Super Mario 64 in full HD, with newer textures, with Bowser actually looking like Bowser rather than an ugly bunch of polygons. Yes, it would have caused more delays, but it would have renewed people's faith in Nintendo and said, yeah, you're worthy of being the richest company in Japan because you're willing to invest so much in taking a quality product and making it even better. I don't know. Maybe Nintendo was just scared that people were impatient and were like, oh no, we're afraid of crowds boycotting us. Every company has to be willing to take risks. You guys took a risk to begin with by inventing the NES. Why are you not willing to do that again? Is it because you've lost a president or something? Okay, so it seems like I've been raging on and on and on about this collection. Is there anything that I actually like about these games changes? Well, I really appreciate the fact that we now get Rumble in Super Mario 64. In Japan, they had a version of the game known as the Shindao version, which, to make a long story short, basically the Japanese version of Mario 64 wasn't really fully finished, and so there were a lot of touches made to the American version that Japan wasn't able to implement. So, Japan acknowledged that the American version did a great job, then took some of those changes and applied it to a later N64 cartridge, as well as adding their own additional refinements because this was 1997, and so Star Fox 64 had come out so they could incorporate the Rumble Pack, as well as other little Japanese-y weirdness things, like making Mario's face multiply on the title screen, because that kind of stuff is expected in a Japanese game, just to be completely like, say what? That their culture is so notorious for. And so it was really cool that we Americans got to have an official version of Super Mario 64 that had never come out in the States. Sure, we lost the "So long, Bowser," but that was still pretty cool. I also really like the fact that every game has an in-game soundtrack. I've always stood by the belief that if a game has music, it should allow you to play the music somewhere in some kind of menu or jukebox. They were able to do it with Banjo-Tooie on the Nintendo 64. And I think to an extent they were also able to even do it on the NES with Kirby's Adventure. So why is it not able to be a universal thing across all games? Are they waiting for their next system? And it's going to be the big selling point of the Switch 2 or whatever Nintendo comes out with is every game has an in-game soundtrack player. Actually, let me make that an official prediction right now before anyone else has their predictions. That's what I'm going to boldly proclaim. If not this next system, then someday in the future, maybe even after I'm long dead, Nintendo is going to make that the gold standard, that every game comes with its own soundtrack, no matter how bad the soundtrack is. And that'll make developers think twice and maybe add little Easter eggs, like bonus tracks that you can only hear in the soundtrack. Ooh, I'm getting good. Off topic. Basically, I don't think this was a celebration-worthy package. I don't think Nintendo did nearly enough work to make it fit into modern standards, and I don't think they did a good enough job of easing Super Mario Sunshine into the hands of newbies. I think they were content with saying, hey, Mario Galaxy is so good of a game that it's going to carry the collection on its own. And while I personally agree with that statement, I don't agree with it 100%. If you're going to present 3 games in a collection, make it so that the games feel equal. Don't make it so that, oh, well, this game was bad to begin with, so let's just keep it bad. No, you're gonna destroy the legacy of games you made. Are you actively trying to get people to hate your products? Because that's a terrible business strategy. So at the end of the day, I'm glad that I bought Super Mario 3D All-Stars, if not only for the fact that I now have Super Mario Galaxy's soundtrack. However, I am very disappointed in Nintendo's laziness. As someone who tries to work as hard as he can, to the point where sometimes I overwork to try to make things as good as possible, Nintendo, look at Sakurai. How much effort he put into Steve remapping every stage so that blocks could be placed in there. Why couldn't that same level of care be done on this? Is it just because Sakurai's not a Nintendo developer? He's from Sora? Why are all games not created equal, especially not 3 games in one collection? I'm just gonna stop here before I get a throat ache, as my voice is already sore, and I don't want to just repeat what everyone else says, as I know you're gonna say, but Paul, you forgot to talk about the fact that 2 of the games are still in 30 FPS. I'm not a frame rate guy. That stuff doesn't bother me. As long as the games don't stutter and chug, I'm totally fine with 30 frames per second. Heck, I put up with Ocarina of Time being 20 frames per second, and that didn't bother me, although I will admit it was nice to play it on the 3DS. But still, the point stands that I'm not that guy that nitpicks over every little detail. However, I am going to be angry if Mario Sunshine has never been re-released, and after 18 years, it's even worse than it was on the GameCube. Mario Galaxy feels worse than it was on the Wii. It may look better, but the controls are hit or miss. Mario 64 has a better version on the DS, which is significantly less powerful than a Switch. And even though this is the Shindao version, it's still ugly as heck. It still doesn't have the graphical enhancements of Super Mario 64 DS. Super Mario Galaxy 2 isn't on this collection. And even if it was going to be on the... or even if they couldn't incorporate it into the collection, they could have incorporated elements of it. You can see that they tried a little bit. Because, if you listen really closely to the opening ditty on the title theme, it's actually the Super Mario Galaxy 2 rendition of Getting a Star. If they could do that, why couldn't they, I don't know, make the co-star mode like it was in Mario Galaxy 2? Or have comet medals? I might have said this already. I might have put it in a previous take. I don't think it would have been that hard, and I think it would have greatly increased the replay value of Mario Galaxy 1 and made people love it even more than they already do. Although at the very least, they kept in Rosalina's storybook. I'm really glad they did that much at least, because with Shigeru Miyamoto hating stories so much, or at least he used to, he might have changed, but he used to really hate stories in Mario games. At least they included that. So maybe in that respect I'll stop complaining, as maybe it'll give him some ideas on if they ever do remake Galaxy 2, maybe they'll actually put a good story into it, or a story at all for that matter. So that ends my discussion on Super Mario 3D All-Stars. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye!